everyone. Welcome to Creativity-Hive's weekly program. I'm Miriam Haugen. I'm part of the Creativity-Hive team. We help creatives learn to make powerful, impactful videos through one-on-one teaching and live group coaching. And our weekly hangout normally or often focuses on people that are working in various forms of motion media and related industries. But there's so much that we can do. Most of us are, many of us are self-employed. And so learning skills that are around that, things about marketing, things about working with others. And in this case, leadership. I am going to bring on our guest today. Welcome. Welcome. So how would you like me to address you?
Just call me Oak.
Oak. Yes, I love it. I love it. What a great name.
Yeah, there's a story behind that.
Oh, I want to hear the story. Tell us the story.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I don't have a middle name. So my next youngest brother, I've got three brothers. My next youngest brother has two middle names. So mother had a sense of humor, I guess. But my name is actually named after a street that near the hospital where I was born. And as far as I knew growing up, nobody else had the first name Oakland. And then when we were going to have my son, our first child, I wanted to name him after her father and my father. So I wanted to name him Kevin James. And my wife said, absolutely not. We're going to name him after you. And I don't know why she has more power than I do, but she obviously did. And I said, okay, that's fine. I said, but you got to give him a middle name because we're not going to have a junior or a second or any of those things. So we did, named him Oakland Vincent after her grandfather, who's an amazing man, passed away a few years, but an amazing man. And then he just had a son 2 years ago. He's got our 2-year-old grandson, and he named him Oakland Maverick. That young man will never be able to hide, ever.
Right. Great name. Oh my gosh. You know, my father's name was Hector, and he did not have a middle name.
Yeah.
But he was a junior.
Okay.
All right. So you're retired from the military.
Yeah. So I retired after 23 years in the Army. I retired a lieutenant colonel. And after I retired from the Army, I ran a food bank. I was the associate director of a food bank for almost 2 years. So I ran the day-to-day operations of that food bank. You don't get much different than that. Combat arms officer in the Army and running a food bank. And then they offered me to come here to Daytona Beach, Florida, which is tough, but somebody's got to live here.
Right.
So I jumped on that opportunity, and I currently, besides my speaking and writing my book and starting my second book, I do recruiting for Army ROTC at one of the universities here in Daytona. And I'm going to do that till about the 29th of September, and I'm going to retire from this job. And then I'm just going to concentrate entirely on writing my second book and getting out and doing speaking engagements.
So tell us about your book. You've written a book.
Yeah, I've written one, Your Leadership Legacy, Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be, which is based on my presentation I give. There's about 15 things that I can talk about in my presentation. Obviously, you can't do that in 45 minutes to an hour. So generally, if somebody hires me, I say, okay, here's the 15 things. Give me 6 of them that you want me to talk about. And then I pick 1 or 2, and that usually is enough. But in the book, I could put it all in there. So all of them are in there. And what I always tell people, 2 things kind of about the book. Number 1, there is no theory in my book. I mean, I know leadership theory, and there's a place for leadership theory in the classroom. But people who come to hear you talk don't want to hear you talk about theory. They want to know, what can I do to make myself a better leader and to make my organization and my people better? And so that's what my presentation and my book is all about, things that every leader can do every day to make themselves a better leader, improve their skills and their abilities, and to make the people who work for them better people and better employees, and make their organization better. And the other piece of the book that I always tell people is, I wrote it thinking I was writing it for aspiring leaders, junior leaders, and I did. And I think if the reviews and people who have read it said absolutely that I hit the spot on that. But I also, without thinking about it, I had a 2-star Marine Corps general read it. And he sent me a message on LinkedIn and said, Oak, I read your book. He said, I didn't learn a whole lot of new things. I've learned a few new techniques about how to do something that I do, but maybe that's a better way to do it. He said, but what I really took out of your book, as I was reading along, I came across a piece and it stuck into my head, said, I used to do that really well, and I don't do that so well anymore. Maybe I need to get back, dedicate some time to get back to doing that as well as I used to.
I can relate to that so much from various things in my life where, I go to hear a speaker and I'm going, oh yeah, I've heard that before. And then I go, yeah, I heard that. Why am I not doing it?
Yeah.
or yes, I used to do it, but then I lapsed. And so
I think we're all that way. We can all use a nudge every now and again. I mean, I don't care how long you've been a leader. If you think you got it all and you can't learn anything else, go do something else, because you're not going to be a good leader anymore.
Okay. So I think that a lot of people tend to think that leadership is something that you just have, that you're just born with. They're born leaders. Do you agree with that?
So I think there's a combination. I do believe there are some people who have some born leadership tendencies, and maybe as a very, very young person, somebody helped develop them just out of just teaching them discipline and those kinds of things. But if, I always use the example, if you don't believe that, then go out there where there's a bunch of 5-year-olds playing soccer. There's a leader out there. Other kids are following a kid because that's the leader. Whether you call him the captain or whatever, he is the one that other young men and women are following. So I think there is something to that. And, I was always a leader as a young boy as well, and on my sports teams and all that, whether we called anybody a captain or not, people followed me. But I do believe 100%, and I do it now, and I've done it for the last 40 years, help develop leaders. I think you can do that. I mean, if somebody really wants to be a leader, there are skills and there are traits and there's things that you can do to help make yourself a leader, and certainly to make yourself a better leader. So I think it's a combination. I think there are some that are born with some leadership traits that they didn't have to be taught. And then there's some that you have to teach it all to them, but they can learn it. And then there's a combination where maybe they were born with a little bit, and then you develop some of those and add a few more. And I always use the story when I was running my ROTC program, my last duty assignment on active duty, I ran an ROTC program. So I was in charge of it. And I had a young freshman walk in day one, and I thought to myself, yeah, that young man's never going to make it. Just immediately, that just came in my mind. And he struggled the first year or two. And then all of a sudden, you could just see it. A light went off. I don't know if it was just he was listening and he was paying attention, and then all of a sudden it just kind of clicked for him. That young man ended up being the battalion commander, the highest ranking cadet in the program, his senior year. So, and he's still in the Army today, and I think he's on the Lieutenant Colonel's list, which if you don't think that makes me feel old, then I got a young man and a young lady who are both on the that I commissioned, who are on the Lieutenant Colonel's list now. So.
Well, my husband actually spent a term and a half, I think, in ROTC, Army ROTC, and that wasn't what he really wanted to do. This I'm going to date myself here, but this was Vietnam War era, and it was he joined ROTC to make sure that he didn't get drafted, to avoid the draft, and then the draft number came out, and it was he had a high enough draft number that he didn't have to worry about it, so he was dropping ROTC. But we've fought often about how our lives would have been different if he had stuck with that.
Yeah.
Maybe he should have. Who knows?
But I promise you, if you ask him, he learned something in those 2 years that he still uses. Because it isn't just about the military. It's not about being a soldier. ROTC at the college level, and any leadership course should do it. It's about a bunch of different things that you use. Communication. I don't care what profession you're in. I don't care if you're not even a leader. Successful people know how to communicate. And so that's one of the skills that we help teach in ROTC. And I promise you, he's probably remembers some of the things he learned there.
Yes, yes, and I know that his commander was trying to talk him out of it and said, you're not going to be slogging through rice paddies. You're going to be a leader. Yeah. And he went, yeah. Anyway, at the time, how old would he have been? 20, 21? And
yeah, absolutely.
So he was going, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But, okay, so give us some tips about leadership. How can you develop leadership?
Yeah, so I always tell when I get to go talk to companies, I've been invited to talk during leadership training, leadership conferences, symposiums, whatever. And I always tell them one of the most important parts of a leader is to develop more leaders. I'm a firm believer if you aren't developing another leader, you're not really a leader, because leaders produce more leaders. And part of that is you got to have that professional development program in your organization where you're helping to develop people. And that's twofold. Number one, you want to develop better leaders because it helps your organization. But also that gives, if you have somebody working for you and they know they have an avenue for advancement to become a leader, and you're providing that through your professional development, that helps motivate that person as well. So a couple things that I always tell people that leaders have to be able to do. You have to be able to communicate. Again, go back to that. That is what leaders do, period. If you can't stand up in front of people and tell people what you want them to do, you can't be a leader. And so I'm a firm believer in that. And I also believe that I'm a firm believer in servant leadership. It's not about you. And yet it's all about you. That's one of the things I say. And I always get, with Colonel McCulloch, how can it not be about me and be all about me? Well, it's not about you in the titles you get or the privileges you get or the better pay you get or any of those kinds of things. If that's why you want to be a leader, go do something else, please. It's all about you and how you treat the people that you have the privilege to lead. And it is a privilege. So I tell all these young lieutenants as we commission them, the day that we commission them, I walk up to them and I say, congratulations, enjoy today, because today is all about you. But once we pin those bars on your shoulder tomorrow morning when you wake up, it will never be about you ever again, because that's what leadership is about. So I think you got to have some selfless service. I think you got to have good communication skills. You must have integrity. My father, as I was growing up all my life, he said, son, nobody can take your integrity away from you. You have to give it away. And he said, and your integrity is the most important part of you being a man. And, he was talking to me as a man, but as a woman as well. So you've got to have integrity. If you don't have integrity, because it's all about trust. Leadership is about trust. Trust is what allows the people who are led to lead, to follow the people who are leading. If you don't have that, then they don't want to follow you. So you got to have trust. And if you don't have integrity, you're going to break that trust. And once you break it, it's broken. It's going to be really, really hard to get it back. So I think that those are some of the things that you got to be able to teach people and enforce on people. And then some individual things that you got to do is you got to develop some good habits and some good self-discipline, I think, if you want to be a good leader.
I'm getting a little better idea of what you mean by servant leadership.
Yeah. I get, when I say that, lots of times somebody who doesn't have any idea what servant leadership is about, they say, well, I don't want to be a servant leader because I don't want people to walk all over me. And I said, If you think that's what servant leadership is, then you really don't understand what servant leadership is. Just because I'm a servant leader does not mean that I always did exactly what the people who work for me wanted to do. On the contrary, lots of times as a servant leader, you have to make people do things that they don't want to do, but it's in their best interest in the long run. And eventually they will see that, but they may not like what they're doing at the time. And I use the example when I was a young lieutenant in the Army. I had a platoon of 32 guys, and we had a standard. Everything that we did, there was a standard. And we'd be out there training and we didn't meet the standard. And it was 5 o'clock in the evening. And I said, we're doing it again, because we're going to meet the standard, because that's how you're going to perform when the time comes in combat or whatever it was we were doing. So I made them stay till we met the standard. If we met the standard at 3 o'clock, we got to go home. But if it was 10 o'clock in the evening, we're still going out there until we meet the standard. So you got to be able to, as a servant leader, you still got to make people do things that they may not want to do, but you have it in your vision that it's in the best interest of not only the organization, but them as well.
You are serving them. It is in their best interest, because they're going to take more pride in their work.
Absolutely.
And they're going to have more respect for you, more self-respect.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And when they're successful at whatever it was you were trying to, they're going to be better motivated, because success breeds motivation. Let's not kid ourselves. In the real world, results do matter.
Right. Well, and self-esteem, you get more self-esteem by being successful, by having a track record and saying, yes, I was able to overcome this problem.
Yeah. And whether that's mental, physical, whatever, you got to be able to work through those things. And the more times you do it and you're more successful at doing it each time, then it becomes easier and easier to force yourself to force through whatever it is that you got to go through, whether it's physical pain or physical hardship or mental issues or whatever it is that you're working through. The more times you're successful, the more you feel like you can accomplish whatever it is you put your mind to.
Is to pull people along and pull and push, I guess, to achieve more.
Well, one of the things that I believe is true, that if you are a servant leader, then people will want to follow you. If you're not a servant leader, that authoritarian micromanaging, and we've all worked for that person. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to work for that person. You'll do what you have to do because you have to. They're the boss. They're not a leader. They're a boss. But you're not going to go that extra mile. You're not going to put in that extra effort for somebody who you don't respect and who you don't really want to follow anyway. And, I had a general that I worked for that told me one time, he said, Oak, leadership is on a scale. And on this end, you got that authoritarian micromanaging, do exactly what I tell you to do and nothing more. And again, nobody likes to work for that person. And then on this end of the scale, you got Attila the Hun in chaos. And he said, you want to be as close to chaos as you feel comfortable. He said, 2 reasons. Number one is that's where creativity happens. That's where you are empowering people to use their own skills, their own knowledge, their own abilities to get things done. And he said, and people will respect that, and people will work harder if they've got some skin in the game. If they're only doing exactly what you tell them to do, then they got no skin in the game. They're doing what you told them to do.
I'm writing that down. Be as close to chaos as possible. That is where creativity happens.
Yeah, I believe that. And I see it all the time. And the way to get there as close as you can get to that. And again, you still have to, you're the leader. You got to feel comfortable where that is. And you're the only one that can decide how far toward chaos you feel comfortable.
Right.
But the way you get there is, number one, you train people to a standard. So they can do what you're asking them to do. And number two, you give them the resources that they need, whether that's people, money, time, material, whatever. And then the most important part is then you give them the authority to make it happen, and you get out of the way. You can give away all the authority you want. You should. You can never give away responsibility as a leader. You are always responsible for everything that does or does not happen in your organization. But you can give authority away all you want.
I think my weakness as a leader has always been I didn't micromanage for the most part. I micromanage myself. I tend to get caught up in details an awful lot. And
a perfectionist.
And so then I'm going, okay, I've got too much on my plate. I need to give some of this away. So then I would train somebody else to do this job, whatever it is, and say, okay, now you're going to do it. And then I would turn my back and go pay attention to something else. And I wouldn't be following up. I wouldn't be encouraging them. I wouldn't be helping them to do that job to the best, better.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, you just because you gave somebody a task and you gave them all the resources and you gave them the authority doesn't mean you get to wash your hands of it. You still have to be available to answer questions, to give advice if they need it, to follow up, to make sure that they're doing things. I in the Army, we call them in progress reviews, however you want to do it, every week or so. If I gave somebody a project every week or so, they'd come in and say, okay, here's where I am. This is where it's going. And I'd say, do you need anything else? And if they did, then we figured out whether or not it was worth continuing, whatever. But you don't get to wash your hands of it. You're still the person who's responsible for it. But you got to let them do it and do it. Will they do it the exact same way you did it? No, probably not. But who cares? The way I always did it was I say, okay, this is what I want it to look like in the end. Here's your resources. Here's your time. And here's the authority to do it. You do it however you want, but it needs to look like this in the end. And as long as they got it to look like that, I didn't care how they did it. Doesn't make any difference to me.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I have to ask you about baseball. I was looking at your profile, and baseball is mentioned a couple of times.
Yeah.
So I've got you have a baseball background or have enjoyed that.
I played baseball from the time I was a little boy all the way up through college. And I loved baseball. I mean, that was a huge part of me. I played baseball, basketball, football, but I was probably the best at baseball. I loved football, but 5'8", 140 pounds, not going to be a big football
player. There's a limit to how far you can go.
Yeah, absolutely. But I loved baseball, and it has always been a part of me. And then when I didn't play baseball anymore, once I went in the Army, I played softball on Army teams all the time throughout my career in the Army. I don't play anymore like you. My body doesn't react the same way it used to. So it's I don't play softball or baseball anymore, but I still love the game.
Well, I'm curious if you could pick any player from all time to say have a catch with, who would it be?
Roberto Clemente. Not only was he a great baseball player, but everything I've read about him and everything I've been able to research about him, he was a great human being as well. And that's how he died. He died in a plane crash going to help people, I believe in Nicaragua, where he was from, after an earthquake. So, I mean, he was going down to give back to his home country that helped produce him as the ball player that he was. And unfortunately, he died in a plane wreck going down there. But yeah, that he's always been one of my heroes growing up. And then again, growing up in Chicago, near Chicago, I grew up in a small little farm town about 90 miles from Chicago, but the Cubs were my team, and Ernie Banks is another one that I always loved.
Cool. All right. Annie, okay, so where would you like people to connect with you?
Yeah, so I have a website. LTC McCulloch.com. And on there, it has my cell phone number. It has my email address. It has, and it also has links to all the social media that I'm on. I'm on LinkedIn, which is where I do spend most of my time. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter, and I have a YouTube channel that has some of my videos on it. It has some of my podcasts that I've been on. And I think you're the 79th podcast I've been on since I started this about 2 years ago. So yeah, if you go to my website, that's where everything goes.
You want to be number 8, having a podcast.
Yeah. I don't have my own podcast, nor will I ever. That's not going to happen.
But you're welcome to be a guest. And you're a great guest. So, okay, in your book, Amazon it's
on Amazon. Yeah, there's a link on my website to take you to the Amazon site. It's available in hardcover, paperback, ebook, and audio. And I read the Audible book. The only other voice on there is my wife. She read about the author and the foreword because she wrote the foreword, so I wanted her to read that. But all the rest of it's me. And if you want a signed copy, then link up with me on my email, and we'll figure out the best way to get you a signed copy.
Oh, that would be fun. I just might have to do that. All right. So, any parting shots?
So I just think, this is what I always tell people because it's so important. Leadership is leadership. So, because I get people all the time who say, well, Colonel McCulloch, you learned how to lead in the Army. You don't know how to lead in the civilian world. And I said, are you crazy? Leadership is leadership because it's all about people. If you can lead people, you can lead any organization. And again, I prove that. I went from 23 years leading in the Army to leading a food bank. And we were very successful. We almost tripled the amount of food that we handed out from the day I got there till the day I left, doubled the size of the truck fleet. So, I mean, if you can lead people, you can lead any organization.
I love that. I think that people probably, they have this misconception that because in the military, they have to follow you. They're
right.
But you worked food bank. I imagine you were working with a lot of volunteers.
Yeah, and that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. But I figured it out. And again, it's about people. So you just got to figure out what motivates people. And I have, in my career, I have figured out that what motivates people is not money and it's not fame. That's not what motivates most people. It is a sense of purpose. Everybody wants a sense of purpose in everything they do, whether it's their work, their relationship, their hobbies, whatever. They want a sense of purpose. That's what makes them. That's what motivates them. That's what makes them feel good. And the way I've figured out over the years, not only in my time of being a leader, but talking to other leaders and helping other people develop their companies, their organizations, is figure out what makes your organization unique. Because that's probably why they joined your organization in the first place. So if you can figure out what makes your organization unique and use that to help motivate people, then you're on the right track.
I'm writing that one down too. Everyone wants a sense of purpose, and figure out what makes your organization unique and why they want to be a part of it and work hard for it.
That's right.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Say goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.